looking forward to this as a sort of unscripted conversation because I've known you for a while now, Porter,
Yeah.
but I've never really had the chance to ask you about Zen Buddhism and what it really is. I didn't know Zen Buddhism existed until I met you, so I think it's the long overdue conversation. So
Yes, I feel the same way. And I was going to say that I think we're both coming from a position of knowing each other and knowing of the existence of the other person's religion, but probably needing to fill in a lot of blanks on the specifics. So yeah, looking forward to doing that in this conversation.
So do you want to open up with trying to define Zen Buddhism in maybe 3 or 5 sentences? Like, I know that's a hard task, but
I know. Yeah, could you go first?
You go first.
Yeah, 'cause I feel like you're much better than me at giving like overviews of things. I'm much more of a specific, detail-oriented kind of thinker. So I need your inspiration.
Okay, I don't know how much I agree, but I'll try to condense. Shia Islam. Well, we can start with Islam more generically. Islam is a religion which emerged in the 7th century through somebody called Muhammad, who Muslims believe to be the final messenger of God after a long line of prophets, including the prophets of the Old Testament and Jesus as well. Muslims consider him to be a prophet, and many, many thousands of more prophets who weren't mentioned explicitly in the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam, the revelation which is believed to have come to the Prophet Muhammad. But Muslims believe that every single nation, every single people had a prophet come to them from God at some point or another in history. And so Islam, in some ways, there's a level of universality which ties in quite nicely with the interfaith because, for example, we're talking about Buddhism today. There are some people who might consider Buddha to be a prophet because of some of his teachings, even though today when we don't find him explicitly talking about Buddhism being explicitly theistic. I think he's not explicitly talking about God. I think Buddha kind of refused to talk about God. He refused to answer some questions. We'll talk about that, I think. Because I'm very interested in what he actually taught.
That's a whole message.
But yeah, the core idea is every prophet preached the same message of monotheism, that there is one God worthy of worship. And that over time, some of those religions have been corrupted, some more so than others, and that Muhammad brought the final message before the end of time. I think that's, and okay, so Shia Islam. I think we'll get into Shia Islam a bit more later, but it's what it basically argues. You have the generic definition of Shia Islam as being to do with politics and succession of the Prophet Muhammad. Like, this person should have succeeded Muhammad after Muhammad died instead of this other person, right? I think a more holistic and insightful way of defining what Shia Islam kind of entails is that Muhammad brought this message, the Quran, which is over here. And I totally didn't prepare this. Here's the Quran. Okay, all Muslims believe in the same Quran.
It's a beautiful looking Quran for everyone who can't see it. Right.
I took this from the prayer room at university, and alas, I never gave it back. But they have
it comes out.
So this Quran, every Muslim believes in the same words of the Quran. It has this, the exact same sentences and chapters and so on, same order. But Muslims over history have disagreed about interpretations of various aspects of the Quran. What Shia Islam argues is that in order to protect the interpretation of the Quran, there were successors to the Prophet who were divinely ordained. They had the correct, okay? So there is none of this postmodernism stuff where, multiple interpretations are correct. There is one correct interpretation. And I wouldn't say Sunnis disagree with that, but Shia Muslims believe that that correct interpretation was upheld by people who were the descendants of the Prophet, right? They were, first was his son-in-law, then his grandsons, and then so on from his grandsons. And there are 12 of them. Okay. I think we'll leave it there.
No, that's great. Thank you, Raahim. I think what I like about the way you said that, which I'm going to now steal, is the sort of starting broad and going specific. So yeah, which I'll try to do with Zen Buddhism as well. So yeah, like starting with Buddhism. Buddhism is also a religion. Nice. Starting already things in common. Great. Yeah, essentially, there was a guy who lived a really long time ago named Siddhartha Gautama, who lived in northern India, or what is now northern India. Yeah, he was, I guess you can kind of look at Buddhism in its origins as a reformation of Hinduism. Although, you know, like the terms Buddhism and Hinduism actually didn't exist until quite recently. I guess, you know, for our purposes today, like one of the really essential things that Siddhartha Gautama did as a historical figure was make a certain argument about this, you know, this idea of enlightenment. You know, that's, and I think an important term that a lot of people will recognize with reference to Buddhism is this idea of enlightenment. And, you know, I think just without going too much in depth, it has everything to do, it has a lot to do with, you know, this sort of way of thinking about the human condition. And there's this idea in Buddhism of suffering as this sort of implicit part of being, you know, the human experience. And Buddhism is really concerned with, you know, working with that kind of implicit suffering in life, and ultimately finding a way to, through various meditative practices and different kinds of prayer, which vary depending on which kind of Buddhism you practice, overcoming suffering as a psychological experience. So, you know, a lot of, I think what Buddhism has to do with is the mind and psychology. Like I've heard the sort of comparison being made that, you know, like Christianity is a religion of the soul, and you know there are other religions which are, you know, it's the religion of the heart, but Buddhism is a religion of the mind. It's about examining your own psychology and really working within, you know, the recesses of your own psyche to sort of solve problems as opposed to working in the world. But that's also something which differs in different Buddhist schools. And so Zen Buddhism specifically is a kind of Buddhism from Japan, which spread from India in like a really long time ago also. But it actually really is sort of thought of as coming from China originally. So the idea is that when Indian Buddhism went to China, there were Chinese people who kind of like figured out a way of practicing Buddhism which incorporated a lot of influences from Confucianism and Taoism, which ultimately evolved into what's called Chan, which is the Chinese way of saying Zen. And you know, it was brought over by another historical figure who's very important in the tradition at a certain point, and made also then, you know, was changed in its kind of transfer over to Japan to become a very specifically kind of Japanese way of practicing Buddhism, which is now kind of spread around the world as well. But you know, it's a lot of, just again, without going too much into depth, it has, I think it's really important to emphasize the way that as it passed through China, it kind of took in a lot of influences from the sort of religious and cultural forms that existed there, you know, vis-a-vis Taoism and Confucianism.